Here we will show how fundamental precepts must be understood when rolling out services. In this case, the fundamental precept or fundamental slavery equation is, one entity does not have the power to force another entity into a contract with itself or with another party. In this first clip we will see Joy Behar supporting Obamacare, which is in its essence the government forcing United States citizens who don't have insurance to purchase insurance from a private company. To make this easy for people with a public school education, government equals entity 1. U.S. citizens equals entity 2. Insurance equals entity 3. Entity 1 is forcing 2 to do business with 3, and if they don't, entity 1 takes money from 2. From this clip we can say that Joy Behar supports government forcing people to do certain acts.
This is why the health care legislation is supposed to cover things like this for everybody.
Because they're saying that they're not getting
health care in this country. Fight for it. It's your right.
So there you have it. As a side note to Joy Behar's comment on "it's a right," please watch my other video on the Greece crisis. If healthcare was a right, then the Greece government wouldn't have cut their funding to hospitals by 40%. But it isn't a right. It's a privilege granted by government and can be taken away by government. This brings me to another fundamental precept or fundamental rights equation is, 1. Rights are not an encumbrance on someone else. 2. Rights are given to you by the Creator. 2. An identifier of what is a right or not a right is that rights require an entity to stop from infringing on them. 3. One right cannot violate another right. Let's take for instance this healthcare piece. I have a right to choose who I do business with, or at the very least if I want to do business at all. I also have a right to what I work for, or otherwise known as property rights. In this healthcare case, if healthcare is a right, then it is violating my property rights. But besides that stuff above, let me point out a major theme in the lack of thinking that goes on in the majority of Americans. The previous clip shows that Joy supports government mandating its laws to the extent it requires us to act or perform. Let's see what happens when government mandates a law that requires someone to perform in a way that goes against Joy's beliefs.
What's the thing that you were concerned about?
There's a couple of bills pending in Virginia. One of them is that women will be required to undergo sonograms, ultrasounds, when they are about to have an abortion. And the other one is that if a heartbeat isn't detected, then they will get a transvaginal ultrasound, which is basically going into the vagina and very intrusive. Now, there is no... As far as I can tell, there's no other procedure, including MRIs and cancer treatments, that are mandated. This would be a mandated treatment for girls who are pregnant to see the child, the infant, the fetus, whatever at that point is, before they get the abortion. And if they can't hear a heartbeat, then they will have to undergo a ultrasound vaginal sonogram, which I had one of those. I had one of those because I had benign tumors on my ovaries a few years ago, and it is extremely intrusive and invasive. And
it's uncomfortable. I agree with you.
It's like, what are we? What is this? The Taliban?
Now? That's actually
in Afghanistan. Where are we exactly in this country?
Well, here you go.
Can you see how amazing this is? Joy, what is intrusive is taking my energy, taking my property, under threat of imprisonment. This is what the federal healthcare mandate does. It takes my hard-earned property. A house divided against itself cannot stand. How is that Joy Behar can have these two contradictory thoughts living in her head? On one side she is for the federal government mandating healthcare. On the other side she is against a state government mandating that a sonogram is given before an abortion is given. I could argue that a state has more liberty to do a mandate type of thing. Remember, we have 50 other choices, or in President Obama's world 57 choices.
Because, you know, it is just wonderful to be back in Oregon, and over the last 15 months we've traveled to every corner of the United States. I've now been in 57 states. I think one left to go. One left to go. Alaska and Hawaii I was not allowed to go to, even though I really wanted to visit, but my staff would not justify it.
This is the level of thinking that is hoisted upon us. I would be more inclined to allow this at the state level than the federal, only due to the fact that I have choices. 50 to be exact. Good old Massachusetts problems with healthcare have no effect on me, and that's the way it should be. This is why we should have an extremely limited federal government. It is important to always remember there is a separation of state and federal. States have their own constitutions. In the end, anyone who listens to Joy Behar in an intellectual context needs to have their head examined.